Flu does one of two things. It does something called antigenic shift, which is gradual change. So you get variants of existing flus, and you might get some cover from previous vaccinations for that, but to get full cover, you've got to adjust to the current flu that's going around. But every so often, you get a major change in the flu, and that's where we risk the possibility of a pandemic. Because suddenly you've got a population, none of whom have ever experienced any flu similar to that. And it will be a big challenge when that happens, because we'll have very little time to produce vaccines to protect people.
Winter has arrived at the NHS. Hospitals are inundated with patients and the threat of a potential flu epidemic from Australia. With Christmas around the corner, more flu clinics are being held for NHS staff to prevent long-term absences and to advocate the annual influenza jab for new inductees. Kent and Medway Trusts are preparing for what has been described as the worst flu season to hit the country, and Medway Foundation Trust is one of the many hospitals advocating their staff to get immunised. Cheryl Kramer is a senior infection control nurse that has held flu clinics for NHS staff all over the UK. She has given over 300 colleagues their immunisation against influenza and is now concentrating on holding clinics for new members of staff.
So today we are doing the flu vaccination clinic, mainly for new inductees to the Trust. So that's about 20 people upstairs who are starting fresh in the Trust today. So some of those people won't have had the flu jab before because they're brand new to healthcare. Some people may have already been in healthcare, so they may have had it before. So this is just to kind of get them when they come into the Trust. Just to kind of promote that this is something that we do like our employees to have every year. So if we can get the message across nice and early, that often kind of reinforces it a little bit. What the flu vaccination does is it's not the one that we have is not a live virus. So it's called a denatured virus, and therefore it's not live anymore. So it's not giving you the flu, it's showing your body the virus without actually giving it to you. And your body has what's called an antibody response, which is where it mobilises its kind of white cells to fight that virus. So then it's created antibodies against that virus.
Medway Foundation Trust currently employs over 4,000 permanent staff. The influenza jab is free for all NHS employees, providing you have filled out the consent form and have your ID badge. Many staff go and get their flu jab whilst they're on shift by visiting their Trust's internal occupational health centre or visiting a flu clinic. How do you feel having your flu jab?
Oh, I'm very, very happy. I think I'll be free from, flu this year or maybe next year.
Have you had your flu jab before?
Yeah, sometime last year.
And do you like having the flu jab? Would you have it?
Oh yeah, every year, yeah. Sometimes I go to my GP, but most times I prefer to do it at work.
All trusts around the country run a campaign called Flu Fighters. It's a government scheme that promotes all staff to have their influenza jab and offers a financial incentive to trusts that get over 75% of their staff immunised. This Flu Fighter campaign, is it this year that it started, or is it every year?
No, it's every year. They do it every year, as I say, from September, and all NHS trusts do it, and it's supported by an NHS website that you can go onto as well and download a lot of posters and stickers and just extraneous material to help you promote your campaign, really. And obviously there are government targets that we need to meet as well. However, we're not, that's not what we're focused on within this trust. It's to try and promote to people, to protect ourselves, to protect our patients, to protect our family, because you can be a carrier of the flu, not actually get the flu and still pass it on to somebody else.
Dr. Julian Spinks is a GP at Courtview Surgery in Strood. Every year he advocates for all staff in the practice to have their flu jab from the moment they're available. However, it's not easy when there is such an increase in patients because of mounting winter pressures.
I believe that we actually have reached a stage where the NHS is in a crisis. I've rarely seen so many instances where it's really falling over. And we struggle to recruit nurses, we're losing them faster than recruiting. So there are so many factors that are coming together that I think it's genuinely a crisis. We have people who are older and sicker and people with multiple diseases, then throw in something like flu and we get to a point where we're no longer really coping with the resources we have. Technology has moved us on, we're having to respond to a different population as well, and there's been multiple reorganisations. About every 3 to 5 years the NHS decides to reorganise itself. And so it's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving, and the pressures, I think, are rising. The NHS has changed dramatically. Making it easier for medical staff, nurses and so on to get the flu jab is probably more important. I hear hospital colleagues who say that to get the flu jab from their hospital, they have to take an hour off their work, go to a centre, queue up and so on. Why don't they have people actually going out to the wards and offering it to people? Because I've found very few colleagues who say, I won't have it, but often people who say, I just don't get round to getting it.
This winter, the UK has seen one of the highest flu rates for 7 years, with nearly 200 confirmed deaths and a staggering 1,552 admissions to intensive care. However, some staff at Medway Maritime are not convinced the jab completely works because it does not offer universal protection.
Why does or doesn't the flu jab appeal to you?
Well, for me, it gave me a bad reaction. And there's so many different strains of flu that I don't really think it helps. We're being bombarded with emails about it and even letters to our home. So yes, we are being pressured to go and have one.
I haven't had it. I think I may have had it once years ago. No, I'd rather fight it with my own immune system at the moment. I think I'm still fit and healthy enough to do that.
And when you did have it, did you notice did it, improve your immunity? Did you not get flu, or did you not really notice a difference?
I didn't notice any difference at all.
I had my flu jab this year to protect myself from the flu and from the influenza. And every year I've been taking flu jabs since '92, so this is not the first time. So every year I've taken my flu jab to protect myself from one of the strain of the influenza. But in the past, I found the majority of people are not taking the flu jab, but now I find the majority of people taking flu jab, and very minority who are not taking their flu jab.
In Dover, locum GP and co-founder of the Resilient GP organisation, Dr. Stephanie DiGiorgio, believes that educating both patients and staff about the dangers of flu can make all the difference when you make the decision of whether to get your flu jab or not.
There's pretty much nothing else that is advertised as much as flu jabs, but even then the message isn't quite getting through. So I think perhaps we need to think about how we educate the public about what flu really is. Just saying something can kill you doesn't help. I think the time off work, just how truly awful you feel with it, needs to be emphasised. I work in A&E as well as being a GP, and the queues of trolleys outside the door is extraordinary, actually. And I've never seen anything like it. I've last worked there 11 years ago, and it is completely different. And those people can't necessarily be dealt with in primary care as it stands. And so I think that at the moment the pressures are such that this very unwell cohort of people need looking after. And there isn't enough hospital space.
Gemma Norman works in occupational health for Medway Maritime Hospital. It focuses on the physical and mental well-being of employees in the workplace and is where staff go to receive their annual vaccination.
Our doctors and nurses have a responsibility to protect patients in whatever way that they can do, which is why we encourage our staff quite heavily to have vaccinations such as hepatitis B, MMR and varicella. I don't think flu should be seen as anything different to that. Around 75% of people carry the flu virus without even realising, and they're obviously spreading that to everyone they're coming into contact with. Depending on the strain of flu we have, it can be potentially lethal. I don't know why people wouldn't want to be vaccinated against that. Not only does it minimise the number of staff coming through the door, actually it relieves the pressure on staff that are fit and well and who are in work and have protected themselves, because they can stay in work to support those pressures. Any of our staff that have gone off sick because they haven't had the flu vaccine obviously have put an additional pressure on their colleagues.
There is a huge debate on whether the influenza jab should be made compulsory for all NHS employees, like measles, mumps and rubella and the chickenpox vaccine. Helen Harrison, who is the lead nurse for general medicine, believes it is important that you should always have a choice.
We've got a capacity problem now, much more so than we've ever had before. So we've got more frail people that need care. We don't have the capacity to deal with them. It's not unusual at all in the winter months to have a queue of ambulances that cannot bring the patients in. We wonder why we've got a 4-hour wait in the community. Well, it's not 4 hours, it's much longer than that. It's because the ambulances are all queued up outside A&E.
So fewer than half of all those eligible for a free flu jab actually have it. So why do you think that is?
Well, because I think it's intrusive, and I think it's, it's down to choice. I don't think, making it free doesn't necessarily make a difference. I would, however, advocate for anyone that's in the most vulnerable groups to have it. I don't think I am, so I wouldn't have it.
The annual flu figures for Medway Maritime Trust were calculated in March, and surprisingly, they did not hit the government's target. While a steady 76% of permanent staff had their flu jab between October 2016 and February 2017, only 72% had their immunisation this year. In response to these figures, NHS England released the following statement.
Cross-contamination is a huge issue for NHS trusts across the country. We advocate for all our employees to get their flu jab so they are protected, and so are their families. Winter is always a particularly difficult time for the NHS, but if we start by immunising our staff, then we are protecting our patients even further.
Last year, Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt announced that elective non-emergency surgeries would be cancelled. However, this has not eased the issue of bed blocking. Medway Hospital's theatre manager Tara Dane spoke about the daily pressures staff face when a fellow colleague is absent with flu.
What you basically have is more people coming into A&E. They're then admitted, going to the wards. Theatre then has problems getting patients from theatre to the wards because they're already blocked with people taking beds. And if you think about it, a lot of surgery we do in the winter would be more like general surgeries. So the general wards are being blocked. Consequently, it's a knock-on effect. Elective surgeries have to be postponed because we know that there's a bed blockage. It's bad enough with emergencies coming in because we're having to do the emergency surgery. We'll get them from the theatre, which is no problem, to recovery. Once in recovery, we cannot get them to a ward because the ward is blocked. If the staff I have are off sick, it limits what I can do and it limits the safety. I think it is a national crisis and we need to do something about it.
A report published by Public Health England showed that flu affects 1 in 10 people in the UK every year. For trusts like Medway Maritime, the battle persists in trying to get all of their staff immunised to prevent further infection. The debate of whether to make the flu vaccination mandatory for all NHS staff continues, as long-term absences and cross-contamination cost our health service hundreds of thousands of pounds every year. But for now, we have the NHS staff that will continue to advocate their fellow colleagues to receive their immunisation and protect themselves against the deadly virus.
I have a flu jab every year, and I do it because actually getting flu is not only going to affect me, but it's going to be a week or so when I can't be seeing patients, so it impacts them as well. So I generally encourage my staff and everybody around to actually have the flu jab, because that's one way we can actually try and keep the service going. Because if I'm off sick, it puts even more pressure on all the doctors around me.
I have it every year. Interestingly, my husband doesn't always have his, but having had flu, he has always had it since then. And he's a GP too. I have asthma, so for me, getting flu would potentially make me really sick.
Certainly every year that I've had the flu jab, I've not come into contact with, I've certainly not been laid up with flu. Other people that I know as well have as well.